Hello and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Megan Smith and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You're welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Next week, there will be no webinar due to the Thanksgiving holiday. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks on December 3rd with Ada Luque Nelson. She'll be giving a presentation about FamilySearch for Latinos Part 2, Editing AI Indexed Records. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Kathryn Grant, who will be talking about using the quality score to improve family tree profiles. Before we begin, here is a little bit about our speaker. After years on the sidelines, Kathryn began doing family history. Somewhat to her surprise, she discovered that she loved it. Her specialty is helping new family historians find success and maybe even avoid some of the mistakes she's made. Kathryn teaches Sunday classes at the BYU Library Family History Center and presents at other family history events. Her column on family history ran in the Nauvoo Times for about a year and is still available online. In addition, she's a regular contributor to the FamilySearch blog. Kathryn works as a technical writer and instructional designer with a focus on usability and process improvement. Her current work assignment includes developing training used on mobile devices. Besides family history, she loves uplifting music, thought-provoking books, and real maple syrup. And Kathryn, if you're ready, we'll turn the time over to you.
That sounds great, Megan. And hey, just quickly before we start, there's already a question in the chat from John. John, we appreciate that. John asks if there is a handout. And John, I actually just shared the link to my slide deck. It's in Google Slides, and Gordon will be putting that in the chat for us. So watch for that link, and then you can just save it, bookmark it, whatever, and you'll have all this information. The reason I don't do handouts is that I discovered that they get out of date like 2 days after my presentation. And a lot of these presentations I either repeat or update. And so by having the link, you'll always get the most current uh, version of the slide deck. Oh, Gordon, thank you. Gordon says at this time he doesn't have the link. I think that's my fault, Gordon, because I didn't send it to you. I apologize. I think I'm mixing it up with a different class. So I will be sure and post that link before we sign off for the day. I'm not going to post it right now because if I do it now, it won't be visible to people who join later. So you guys help me remember to post the link and I'll do it after the last slide. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and you should see that now or at least very soon. As Megan said, if you don't see it for any reason, post a note in the chat and she can assist you with that. But you guys, I am so excited to be with you today to talk about a great tool in Family Search, in the family tree part of the Family Search website, and that is the quality score. So here's what we've got on our schedule for today. First of all, we're going to review what the quality score is, and then we're going to talk about what it isn't, because I've noticed there are some misconceptions going around. After that, we'll walk through two quick examples of fixing quality errors that were found by the quality score tool, and then we'll show you how to give feedback. And then I will remember to post the link, but again, remind me if I forget that. So what is the quality score? It is a tool on family tree profile pages that does two things for us. First of all, it helps us evaluate the profile information and it suggests specific improvements that we can make to a profile. The profile quality score, or well, should just call it quality score, has 3 levels. So it's very simple. This is not a complicated tool. So you will see ratings of low, medium, and high. The quality score appears in two places. The overall score appears on the Details tab of a profile over here in the Research Help section. So you just see it right up there at the top of the Research Help box. But it also appears for any item that can have a source attached, such as the name or the birth or a residence. So to see that individual quality score, for instance, here we're going to click on the pencil, the edit icon next to birth because we want to see the quality rating for the birth. So I'm going to click that and it opens up the details screen for birth information. And we see that right now it has medium quality. Now it doesn't give us more detail right here about the individual item, but in a couple of slides we'll show where you can get that detail. There are four quality score components: data completeness, source tagging, source consistency, and conflict-free data. The way that we see the detail on these four components is to click Show Quality Details. And when we do that, a panel opens up that shows us each of those four components. Now, it's worth pointing out at this point that the individual component scores determine the overall score. So these kind of feed back in to this overall score that we see under Research Help. So let's go over the definitions of each of these components of the quality score. The first one, data completeness, actually just refers to information in the vital information section of the profile. So name, sex, birth, death. It actually doesn't apply to christening because not everybody will have a christening. In other words, you don't get dinged on the quality score if you don't have any christening information. It probably does ding you if it has christening information, but it's incomplete. But if the person never got christened, then of course there's not going to be any christening information. The next item is source tagging. Are sources tagged to support profile information? If you're hearing that and you go, ugh, I don't know what the heck source tagging is, we're actually going to give an example of that along with a link to more information if that's a new concept for you. The next item is source consistency. First of all, are sources attached? If not, it will make that part of the feedback, part of the suggestions for improvement. And then is profile information consistent with those sources? And finally, conflict-free data. Is the profile free of data conflicts, such as a christening happening before a birth, which didn't happen? A child could not be christened because the child had to be physically born in order to be christened. You might be looking at these numbers here and think that they were a score for that particular component, but they actually aren't. They just show you the number of items for that component, the number of issues that need to be addressed for that component. So, how do you see a list of those issues? Well, there's a little arrow over here that indicates that this is an expandable section. And you can click any place in this section to expand it. And when you do, you get a list of those items. So here we see that there were four or are four data completeness issues. And when we click this to open it, it lists the four issues for us. Where does the quality score appear, or when is a better way to say that? When does it appear? Because it does not appear on all profiles. Well, here's a list, and we are not going to bore everybody by reading through the whole list. But basically, the quality score appears on profiles that have the following birth dates and places. This is as of the 7th of October of this year, 2025. I took this information from a Help Center article in the FamilySearch Help and Learning Center, and these dates and places are constantly being expanded. So that's why I put the date on here. If you want the most recent information, just click this link to go to the Help Center article. I remember when I first started using the quality score, there were, I think, 3 countries with some limited date spans, and it's just been expanding like crazy since then. So if you are working on a family member and you don't see their country or their time period here, chances are that it's going to be added in the future and you'll be able to take advantage of the quality score for those people. I haven't heard any guarantee that it's going to be added for every single time period of every single country in the world. In fact, I don't know how that would be done just because you can only go so far back, right, and get reliable records. But I can tell from this list that they're trying to hit a lot of the countries and time periods that are that most appear in Family Tree. But of course, Family Tree is going to be growing, so they will be adding more places and date ranges. Okay, finally, wanted to end up with a tip. As we look at this, or end up this section, I should say, with a tip. As we look at this profile for Charles William Dean, we notice that he's born in 1851. Well, that's well within the range of most of those places. If we pop back here, a lot of them start in the 1800s. So what's the deal with a guy born in 1851 having a quality score that's not available? And we look at his christening and it says London. The UK is included on that list. So why is it not showing up? Well, it's because he only has a birth date. In order for the quality score tool to work correctly, it has to have both a birth date and a country, because otherwise, how can it tell if it falls within any of those date ranges and places? So back to this slide, this is not showing the quality score because it's missing a birthplace, but the way to get it to show up, since it does qualify by means of the year and the place, is just to add a birthplace. So that would then cause the quality score to be available. Okay, let's do some myth busting. What is the quality score not? So I felt that this was important to say because I've seen these misconceptions floating around. The quality score does not measure all possible aspects of quality. Right now, it just measures those 4 that we talked about. And a high score is not a guarantee of perfect quality. For example, the quality score does not measure whether bad merges have been done on this person. It doesn't measure if there are some wrong relationships. Actually, here's an example of that. I was just working on this person the other day, came to their profile and saw that the score was high. That's fantastic, but it's high in those 4 components only, because as I dug into things, she's connected to the wrong spouse. So if you're wondering how that happened, and just a very brief description of how I figured that out, is I went to the one source that, and it wasn't even a marriage source, it was the 1939 register, and I saw Cuthbert there, and he had a wife named Maud. But funny thing was, her initials showed up as M. And as I looked at her more closely, I discovered that her maiden name was Chapman. So she was like Maud Mary Chapman. So somebody had jumped to a conclusion just based on the name Maud that she was the spouse of this guy in the 1939, and she wasn't. And they were to get Cuthbert and Maud Mary were together, and Beatrice actually ended up marrying a guy named, I think, Frederick Mason, if I'm remembering right. But anyway, suffice it to say that research showed that these guys were never married. And so that quality score was wonderful for the 4 components. But again, we can't just say, oh, everything's perfect and I don't need to do any other checking. We still need to check the other items that aren't necessarily included in the quality score. Another thing, I have to say that this, I have never come across this, but I've talked to several people who say that they have. And that is apparently when this quality score was first rolled out and somebody got like on their great grandmother's page and saw low, they're like, "How dare you call my grandmother a low quality person?" Well, that's not what the score is about. It is nothing to do with the worth or the value of that individual. It's strictly about the data. And it's also not a judgment on the contributors. It is just saying how the data looks for those four components that we covered. There is one more item, and I'm going to keep us all in suspense until the end because it actually fits better towards the end of the webinar. So just know that we're going to bust one more myth when we get to the end. But now let's talk about how to fix quality errors that are pointed out by the tool. So first example, this is Samuel Edwards. And as we look at Samuel's profile, we notice that, oh, he has a low score. So what's up with that? We click Show Quality Details and it opens up and just a tip that I've noticed, and I actually, this is just my experience. I don't have any documentation on this, but it looks to me like whenever there are conflicts, that dings the score the most, which kind of makes sense, right? Because the other things like data completeness, well, a record could be, it could lack a little bit of data, but still be essentially right. But if there are conflicts, that means that something's gone wrong, like a death happening before a birth, or, a mother having children when she's two, things that just are not possible, conflicts that indicate this data cannot possibly be correct. Well, in this case, we have the explanation. So we click this to open it up, and it says we've got a christening that happened before a birth, at least according to the information on the profile page. So as you look over here at the birth and the christening, you see, yep, we got a birth taking place in 1880, but a christening taking place a year earlier in 1879. So what's up with that? Well, the first thing that I want to do when I see a conflict is say, well, where did the person get this information? Because that might help me understand why there's a conflict between these two dates. So I'm going to click the pencil to open up our detail view here. Notice the little individual quality score is also low because of the conflict with the christening. What do you guys notice about the source for the birth? And go ahead and put this in the chat if you would like to. So I am going to open up there we go. So do you notice why this birth might be off a little bit? Oops, I should move the mouse. Yes, John, very good. So census records, and Anne said the same thing. So census records are known to be iffy on birth dates. S- they can be iffy because people lied, but in this case, I don't think that was the case. And lied, sometimes they lied more often. Like my ancestors, a lot of them were just illiterate. They didn't have education. I have a hard time living in a literate country with a decent education, remembering my birth year. And so for if you grew up not reading and writing and you were 50 or 55, you may not remember your exact birth year. So you tell the census taker something and it's a little off. But the other thing is that even for like Samuel was young here, so it's very unlikely that his estimated birth year was wrong. The thing is, remember on censuses, most censuses They don't actually ask for the birth year, they ask for the age. And then the software, like FamilySearch's software or Ancestry.com, they compute an approximate birth year based on the age in the census. So, depending on when the birth date was compared to when the census was taken, the birth can be off by a year or so. And that is most likely what happened here. So, his estimated birth year is 1880, and that was a good estimate, but it turns out it apparently is not quite right. I don't see any reason statement here. That's another thing that helps to explain. I mean, we could kind of tell, right? It took us a little minute to look at this and figure it out. But we're going to see an example in a minute of how it can be helpful to put a reason statement in there as to why this information is correct. Just a tip on this: when you're entering a birth year based on a census, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. Sometimes that's all we've got, right? But knowing that with very few exceptions, like what's the one census that gives in the US that gives the birth month and year? I think it's either 1900 or 1910. Unless you've got a census that gave you exact birth information, it's always going to be approximate. So it would be a good practice to put the word about before the year as a visual cue to users to tell them that that birth was estimated. So let's figure out what we would do now to find the actual birth date. The thing, or at least a birth year, the thing that comes to my mind is that at this time in England in 1880, Samuel's parents would have been required to register him, or somebody would have been required to register his actual birth information with the government. That's referred to as civil registration. So that's what I want to do now is I want to look for a civil registration of Samuel's birth. And lo and behold, after a very quick search, I discovered that FamilySearch had Samuel's civil birth registration, and look at the year. It is indeed 1879. So I attach this source to Samuel, and then I come back, and there's a number of things that I do to act on the good advice given to us by the quality tool, the quality score. So the first thing I do is I'm going to tag this birth source to his birth so it shows up as one of the tagged sources. I'm erasing that old birth year. I'm entering the correct one, and I don't have to put about because I've got the birth registration and I absolutely know that this is the correct year. We've got the birthplace from the census, and that's okay. And then for the reason, I like to tell people where I found the information. I don't write a long essay. I don't think reason statements need to be long and complicated, but I just want people to see easily why I believe this information is correct. Well, the birth year, I believe it's correct because I found it in the civil birth registration, which is tagged up here, and the birthplace was provided in the census. So then once I've made all those changes, oh, sorry, forgot I had all these little call outs, fancy call outs, and I didn't even use them. So we fix the birth, we add the reason statement, and then notice what happens. We've got high quality instead of low quality. And when we get back out to the main page, notice that conflict-free data now has 0 issues. So that's the first item that we're fixing. Let's look at another even easier example. So source tagging is often one of the easiest things to fix. In this case, Samuel has a quality suggestion, one quality suggestion that the residence has no tagged sources. So, of course, by inference, the suggestion is tag the source. And indeed, as we look over here, we see that there is a residence. It matches what we saw in the 1881 census, but 0 sources. Now, one thing to be aware of on this is that for a while there was a bug on SourceLinker, and it's been, gosh, 5, 6 months or something. It's been a while since they fixed it. So you're not going to see this particular problem anymore, but for a while with new sources that you attach. But for sources that were attached before the bug was fixed, you might see a residence that was added by the source linker, but the source it was added from was not attached. Fortunately, it is super easy to tag a source to anything. And in this case, we're going to tag the source to the residence. So the way we do that again is to click the pencil, click the edit icon, and it brings up that detailed screen page, whatever you want to call it. And notice that over here, we've got the ability to tag sources, but there are no sources that have been tagged to the residence. The thing is, we have very good reason to believe that the source is there because 1881, a residence in 81, that's almost certainly, since we're working in England, it's going to be referring to the 1881 census. So the way we tag the source from here is we click Tag Sources. And when we do that, we get this pop-up of all the sources that are currently attached. We click and we see that the 1881 is one of them. So we click Select Source, and when we do that, we get the same list, except now it has checkboxes. So we click the source that we want to tag to the 1881 residence, which is the 1881 census, and then we click Save and we come back to that main screen. And now we notice that the source, the census source is tagged to this residence. And then also, I just like to add the reason statement, especially for a new user. They might come in this and see a source, but not quite yet realize the correspondence between the tagging and the fact that this residence is showing up. So this is not absolutely required, but I like to just put in very clear terms the residence was provided in the 1881 census. Is that a little redundant? Yeah, but I figure, especially for new users, it's going to make it very clear and could possibly be helpful to them. So after we do that, we click Save. Oh, there is one other thing that I wanted to mention. And this, I don't know, you guys, I probably would consider this a bug. It might be by design, but the reason this Save button is showing up after I tagged it is not because I tagged it, it's because I added the reason statement after. I have noticed that if I just open up this detail screen and I tag a source and I don't do anything else, the save button is grayed out. So it looks like I can't save it, but if I hit cancel and get out, it has saved it. And I think that is because, let me back up a minute. Do you remember when we were over here on this screen, it did save it here. But I actually, moving forward, I expected that when I came back out to this, it would still want me to save. It just doesn't seem safe to me to cancel. I'm like, wait, I don't want to cancel the tag. I want the tag. So just be aware that if all you did was tag something, at least as of the date of this webinar, the save button could be grayed out. If it is, click cancel, but you should still see that the source has been tagged. So now we come back and the quality score is even better. Now notice because it's broad brush, right? It's low, medium, high. It's still medium, but we can tell it's better because now there are zero issues in source tagging, zero issues in source I can't say this, source consistency, and zero issues in conflict-free data. So we've cleared up issues in three of the components, three of the categories. Now, there are additional things in data completeness, and I suspect that if we cleared those all up, then we would have a high quality score. We're not going to do that in this webinar. What we've illustrated is sufficient. So if you want to learn more about source tagging, here is a link to the webinar that goes into quite a bit of detail on source tagging. And source tagging, I think, is a underappreciated, powerful aspect of of high quality on profile pages because it's just a simple way to say which sources support which pieces of data. And this is a live link, so when we put the link to this slide deck in the chat at the end, you'll be able to navigate to this page, click this link, and watch the YouTube video. Okay, here is the final Mythbuster. So, myth number one, you should always resolve every quality issue. And you are a bad family historian if you don't. Those are myths. That is not true. FamilySearch did not roll out the data quality score to police you or make you feel guilty or anything like that. They rolled it out to help us. They rolled it out to give us some good solid recommendations in four categories, four components to tell us what we could do to make a profile more accurate and more complete. So the truth is, some issues, such as data conflicts, like we said earlier, are more important than others. Fixing them has a greater impact on quality than some of the others. For instance, one of the quality errors said, "Oh, your date is missing a month." Well, I'd like to have the month. Adding the month is good, but having the year there is not bad. Like having the year there is fine. It's just that it would be a little more complete if I had the day and the month. Don't stress if you can't resolve every quality issue. I'll be honest with you, you guys. I have a spreadsheet full of bad merges that I'm trying to sort out. And honestly, when I look at some of these data quality issues that I know are not a huge deal, I leave them for somebody else to work on because they're not significantly affecting quality. They're not likely to be confusing to people. Like the fact that there's a year and not a month is probably not going to confuse a new user or someone who's not familiar with that person. So it really is a matter of priority. Don't stress if you can't or don't prioritize every quality issue. You have to decide the best way to spend your discretionary time when you're doing family history. And the fact is, some issues can't be resolved. Sometimes there will be an approximate birth date, for instance, and it will be from a time period when birth records simply were not kept. An example that comes to mind is a christening. Many in England, let me narrow it to England. Back in the 1700s, there was no civil birth registration. Some clergymen did write a birth date in on a baptism record, but most didn't. And so back in the 1700s in England, unless the clergyman wrote the birth date or you get a family Bible or something, you may not be able to ever know that birth date. And so we have to leave the quality issue unresolved. And that's okay because we're doing the best we can with the records that we have. So the bottom line is just use your best judgment. Again, don't let the quality score become a guilt trip or you feel bad because you couldn't bump it up to high. Just address what you can, do your best, and it's good. So here is an example just to show you what that looks like, where it says the birth date is missing a month. Great. If I could, like maybe I want to pay the three. So here in 1879, I could pay £3 and I could order the birth registration, a copy of the registration from the General Register Office. And then I would have the birth month and the birth day, in fact. So again, that's totally up to you. You shouldn't feel obligated to buy that just because the quality score tool said you're missing this information. If you want to, yeah, it's great. But this is the purpose of this is not to make you spend money or spend hours and hours trying to resolve every single item. Again, use your best judgment, do the best you can, and just realize this is a fantastic tool for guiding us to make our profiles more accurate and more complete. So, how do you give feedback? Suppose that you find a glitch in the tool or you don't understand a recommendation. Maybe you don't feel that it's phrased very clearly. Well, giving feedback is super simple. At the bottom of that panel that opens up with the four components, there's a feedback button. When you click the feedback button, it will actually take you to the Family Search community group on the data quality score. You know, when they started out, they called it data quality, and I noticed the group still does, but now on the profile page, it just says quality score, but it's the same thing. I don't know if somebody thought that data was maybe a little intimidating, but I personally think it's helpful because it says what kind of quality we're looking at. We're looking at the quality of the data on the profile page. So this is a really great group, a lot of great knowledgeable people. So if you have a question about using the quality score or you want to make a suggestion for improvement, come to this group and post a message there. And Family Search employees do monitor this group, so you can be sure that your feedback is going to be heard and considered. Okay, everybody, that brings us to the end of our webinar today. Just by a way of quick review, the quality score is a tool that helps you improve the accuracy and completeness of profile data. A high quality score is not a guarantee of perfect quality, as we saw. Fixing quality error, or you fix quality errors by following the provided suggestions, and you can give feedback in the Family Search community. So everybody, thank you so much for coming to this webinar. And I did remember to do the link. I'm amazed at myself actually, because more than once I've forgotten. I've gotten off the recording and said, oh no, I totally forgot. So let me just grab the URL here. I'm going to change it to preview mode because that gives you a much nicer view. So now I'm going to select all, copy, come back to the chat and say slide deck. There's the link, and there you go. So you guys, you should be able to click on that straight from the chat, and then once you do, you'll be able to bookmark it or just review it at your convenience, whatever you would like to do. So that brings us to the end. Megan, do we have any questions that we need to address?
Um, it doesn't look like any questions. John had just sent in the chat a comment. He said when it comes to the death date is missing, I look at the last source that person did appear on, such as the 1920 census, and then I enter a death date of after 1920. He said, I think it's better than just leaving it blank when in reality you do have an idea of when he died.
John, I'm going to respectfully disagree with that just because, and I'll explain why. Because I totally see your logic, but the reason is that more than once, that very thing has tripped me up and it has tripped other people up because it looks in the profile page and in the search results as if that is the actual death date, like after 1920 or whatever. And so I will just leave it as deceased. I won't, and I don't think I've ever seen a policy on this, so just take this as my opinion. I will leave it without a death date, but I will put a note over in, you know how you can go to the collaborate tab and you can enter a note or you can start a discussion. But the reason I don't recommend doing that is just that it has tripped me up where I've been like, oh, this guy must have died in 1920. So then I spend several hours on why can't I find a death? And then I look and say, oh, the person just put that they died after this date, and we really don't know. It could have been anytime from 1920 to 2000 or something, and it just is too wide of a range in my personal opinion. So take that for what it's worth, but I do appreciate you making that comment. Anything else that we need to address or cover?
Just some people saying thanks in the comments. Oh, here's a question. Mika says, when I have a baptism date but not a birth date, should I put in a year?
Oh, that is such a good question. Let me back up to one of the other slides and just show you what I recommend. And again, this is just based on experience of working with people and also understanding the data on the profile page. So if I had not been able to find a birth date there, I still know that it's pretty close based on the 1881, right? So what I would have put in the birth date is I would put 1879 because I have reason to believe that that's very close. I probably would have put about 1879 just in case they were born, like at the end of 1878. Again, in this little scenario, I don't have any proof. I'm completely inferring it from the christening. So it's safe to infer from the christening that they were born about 1879. Oh, infer from the christening and the census that they were born about 1879. And if I had not found a birthplace, it would also be safe to infer in England at this time that they were very likely born in Aldridge. So I would have put that information, but in the reason statement, I would have put that I inferred it from the christening. So I think inference is a powerful family history tool, but I think whenever we do it, let me just back up there a second to be clear on what inferring is. Inferring is not assuming. Inferring is not just a wild guess. Inferring is saying, I don't know this information exactly, but I've got some pretty solid evidence that it's probably pretty accurate. And so whenever I make an inference, I just note that I say I've inferred the birth date and place from the christening date and place. So I hope that helps.
Seems like that was the only question. So
Great.
thank you so much, Kathryn. This was very helpful information. And thank you all for joining us today. As a reminder, we won't have a webinar next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday. But our next webinar will be in 2 weeks on December 3rd with Ada Luque Nelson about Family Search for Latinos Part 2, Editing AI Indexed Records. A recording of this webinar will be made available by next week. You can do that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fh_webinars@byu.edu or follow our Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.